Welcome, Quanta folks, to session 2 of Take the Leap. We're delighted to have you joining us. I'm Jodie from QuantiMama.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kerry from QuantiMama. Thanks for joining us again.
Yeah.
Session number 2.
Session number 2. And thank you so much for being here, whether you're here now or watching the replay. All of this is of great advantage to our kids. So it is a beautiful thing that we join here together. Before we really get stuck into session 2 and pick up particularly on the human design that we left off last session. So thank you very much for doing your homework. And now's a great opportunity if you are watching the replay to pause and quickly do your homework.
Yeah, totally.
Sorry, home pleasure.
It's not long.
It's not long. No, it's good. But in fact, there's great advantage to it. And I think that's a great springboard. And we'll get into lots of things tonight. But firstly, let's just bring ourselves into this present moment. It is a beautiful thing just to take some breaths and just, I think, drop away the day. So wherever you find yourself, whether that's morning, noon, night, or very early in the hours of the morning, however that finds you, just bring yourself into your body and the present moment. And we do this just by noticing the breath. Noticing that our attention moves into our body and away from all the external noise of our surroundings, the external noise of what's already happened today, in the last day, week, month, year, what's ahead of us the next day, month, year, decade. And just into this present moment where we can use our breath and just reflect on the 4 foundations that we have throughout this Take the Leap course, where we notice our body. So the first foundation is that we notice our body. We use our breath to just bring that centered and stillness back into our world for a moment and really bring us into the present moment. And then we notice where that inner voice or that inner truth wants to show up. So that's the voice that dwells within, and we access that through that body awareness and that breath. And we just shift our attention to the outside world as one of observation, rather than taking direction or outsourcing all those things that we look for, external gratification, validation, permission. We just bring our awareness back into our body. We note that the outside world is there to be observed and to inform, but not to make our decisions. And we just tune into that inner truth or that inner voice that we all have within. Just taking another breath just to anchor in those 4 foundations. And just bringing your awareness back out into this space, finding the breath makes you more wakeful. Thank you so much. So thank you for indulging us in that little participation. Before we really get into all the cool things that we're going to talk about tonight in session 2 of Take the Leap, which includes human design, we're going to talk about teaching and facilitating, about reflections of school, about our kids' learning experiences, and also about creating meaningful learning opportunities and connections with our kids. What we'd first like to do is just continue that that stillness and I guess that little bit of introspection and tuning into what we want for our kids and what we see as being in their highest good. And we're just going to continue that just by enjoying this mind movie, which is called I Am Child. Mind movies are a wonderful, super fast meditation practice, mindset shifting option for you, but also for your kids. And this one has been made for children so that they can really engage with, I think, the very powerful affirmations that one needs to stay really centered and grounded as they move into adulthood. So we'll see you back here in a moment, and please enjoy this beautiful mind movie. Just a snappy 2 minutes. beautiful. Welcome back. All right, I'm delighted now to have QuantiMama Kerry. Is going to take us through part 2 of human design.
Yeah, it was. We're just briefly going to cover human design because there's a lot behind it, and I did explain the intro of it last week, where it sort of comes from and how to use it. But just to remind you, is that it's really just an opportunity to really get deeper into understanding who our kids are. And just to remind you this, that it's about what their potential is and just the environment that they seem to thrive in. So that's why we felt that this was a really important part of the program, because it's something that you can start at the first sort of steps, but it can be so much bigger than just what we cover today. So we spoke last week about the types of human design, and what I'm hoping is that today you've come back with what your children's type are, even if it's just one. If you want to focus on just one, please, that's a great place to start, because otherwise it can get very confusing and your mind can get very overwhelmed. So if you just think about the one child that you want to focus on, and maybe even pop it in the chat as to what type they are, whether they're a generator, a manifestor, a man-gen, a reflector, a projector. We did also send out just a summary of all of this because it is quite big. It's like, astrology on steroids, isn't it really?
Yes, it really is.
So there's a lot of depth to it, but we'll just keep to it simple. So it really just helps you to stop comparing your children to others, and even stop comparing your children to their siblings once you know what their type is. And you can just work with them so much better. There's a real level of understanding and trust then that you can build in the relationship. So, is the chat there?
Okay, yeah, we
Um,
have. So, one of our parents has said that their children made it easy on them. It depends on your perspective, but that they're both
yep.
projectors.
Okay.
Now, do
Good.
we need any more information around that, Kes?
Well, projectors are really they really just love to know that they are valued and that they are seen. So if they feel in their environment, whether it be, with friends, family, at home, outside of the home, if they feel like they're seen and they're valued, then they can give a lot more of who they are. So that's probably the bottom line of what a projector actually is. They're sort of seen as being the wise owls, and they can really see things that other people can't see. So they can see, what's going on within people and within systems that others just can't see. So they're quite wise. So that's a great one to have two projectors.
So just before you move on, because I can see you racing ahead
I
now. So there were a couple of other things that come up when you actually do this assessment.
Yep.
And so one of the things that I thought was interesting was essentially some language, I'm not sure how it was phrased, but essentially what it means when they're in alignment and what it means when they're out of alignment.
Yeah.
Now, they're interesting. So I'm curious, do you happen to know about your projectors and what those two things are for this parent that's popped that in there? I mean, like how much does that change it? Because we have 3 generators in our house and 3 man-gens.
Yes.
But all of us are a little bit different. And
Yeah.
obviously that shows up because we're all different personalities too.
Yes.
So when we're talking about projectors, like what are some of the nuances that we see within that?
Yeah, so what the other element of this is that we're looking at is not only do you know their type being a projector, but then it's really good to understand what their strategy is and what their authority is. And when you did the reading on them, it'll show you what they are. So the type is about how they use their energy. The strategy is about how they make things happen without any resistance. So what just naturally comes to them.
So we're talking a flow state then.
Flow state. And then the authority is around how they best make decisions. So perhaps if that parent with the projectors can maybe give us an understanding of what their strategy might be, that then determines just how they make things happen for them. And again, on the cheat sheet that we gave you, it talks about just what they need to do in order to make things happen around them. So some have to wait to respond. So some of them wait for things to come to them, like they're magnets, and they just wait. Everything happens for them. It really comes straight to them, and then they respond. Others have to really inform other people. So it's like, I've got this idea. If I tell mum and dad what I want and how I want it to happen, then I can go ahead with it. But I really need to make sure that those people who are supporting me understand the how and the why. Others really need a lot more time, and say a reflector needs to wait a whole sort of a lunar cycle. Sometimes it's weeks before they actually get that clarity around what they need. So yeah, the different strategies are really around how they make opportunities happen. So
So if we think then about projectors, um, how does that work from supporting them from a homeschooling perspective?
yeah, it really is about knowing that projectors want to share their gifts. They've got, obviously, everyone has their own gifts, but they want to share it, but they have to wait for someone to notice them. So we need to give them opportunities to actually pay attention to what their gifts are. So, for example, today I've got a projector in my house as well. And when you ask for their input on something, they love to share, like they love to pass on their knowledge and their wisdom, but they actually don't just give it freely. They really like to know that you want to know it. So you have to say, so tell me, what do you think about that? Or how would you do that? And so as soon as you understand that that's how they make things happen, is by inviting them to share their gifts, then they feel more comfortable. There's an element of trust in the relationship that they're going to be heard, they're going to be seen, and what they've got to contribute is actually going to be valued.
It fits neatly into, I think, a lot of the things that we'll talk about anyway, which is about establishing trust with your child, particularly as you move into homeschooling, because when you do ask a child something and they're not accustomed to being asked their opinion, particularly if they're detoxing from being at school,
Yep.
that establishment of trust is really paramount. And so if you ask something, you have to show up. So this thing of asking with tech in your hand, you've got to put your tech down. You've got to be fully present with this stuff. But I guess what you're saying from a projector point of view is that they need that even more purposefully done.
Absolutely. Because you'll have some who just naturally want to share everything and just want to come out of the gates and explain everything and be sort of the teacher themselves, but you have to understand what it is that makes them feel like engaging in the process. And if they feel like that the environment is going to support them, then they can show what their true gifts are. So that's definitely a big part of a projector, is that they need to wait to be invited.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And that's great feedback. Thank you so much for sharing that you've noticed this past week that you got the most open and honest conversations after being recognised. That's
awesome.
beautiful.
Yep, that's
okay.
perfect.
Well, that's fantastic. All right, so that's projectors. We've got a bit of an idea on projectors. We've also got one of our parents have got a generator in their household, a bit like my family.
The generators,
I'm just curious if we have more information. Have you got more information about the generator in terms of what were the things?
They're the life force. They're the ones who are out there wanting to build things up. When they get lit up by something, they just go for it and just nothing's going to get in their way. They just want to keep focusing on, if they're a Lego builder, they could do it for hours and hours and hours because they're just so lit up by it. So I'm not sure if that parent sort of has noticed that within their child as a generator. They just go. They've got a real lot of energy that just doesn't stop until they really feel completed and satiated.
Well, I mean, I see that in our household. As I said, I've got 3 generators, including QuantiPapa McGill. And not that he's so much of an issue, but our daughter is a generator, and she's even intent on the fact that she's trying to manifest herself another horse. But her mode of manifestation is basically just to nag us into buying a property that can accommodate a horse.
Of course.
It's a little bit narrow-minded in terms of the way she's executing it, but it's that tenacity, and it's just like, wow, kid is really not deviating from this as a solution. And I keep saying you're going to have to get more creative. Okay, so we've got some feedback. Okay, so this little generator is a live wire, almost a force of nature when he's focused.
Yeah, and it's like
better you than me, I say.
I know those kids do not like to be told to stop.
No.
When you've got to sort of try and get out of the house and you've got things on and you kind of need their attention, you just got to stop their flow. And then what happens as a parent, we get frustrated because they're not listening to us.
Yes.
Or we feel like they're misbehaving and they're not respecting us. But actually what you're doing is you are trying to stop their force, their life force. And I think, again, once you understand that that's how they generally operate, we can be a little bit more accommodating to them. And, yeah, just work with them appropriately and not
Mm,
seeing it as a misbehavior, but it's
mm,
just that you're asking them to work out of alignment with what they naturally feel
mm.
is the thing that makes them feel great.
So I wonder if the parents out there that do have generators that
Mm,
perhaps have got children that are coming out of school, perhaps school ended up not being the right fit for them,
mm,
if that maybe offers a little bit of context, because there is definitely a spaciousness that you can accommodate at when you're home educating
yep.
to allow, or not to allow, but to enable or facilitate your child to have space to kind of follow through with whatever project they're wanting to do.
Mm,
Obviously, because what school does
mm,
is it's sort of homogenized in the sense that for the masses, you've got 24, 26, 28 kids
yeah.
being shuffled into different
Mm,
activities every 1 to 2 hours. And I
mm,
imagine for a
mm.
generator who's really into whatever they're doing,
Yep.
that must be quite disruptive.
Totally,
Mm,
totally.
mm,
Yeah, and each type just has the natural learning environment that they
mm,
need to work within. And if it's
mm,
not understood and appreciated, we
mm,
can really be forcing them to do things that
mm,
just feel like they can't trust the
mm,
process,
mm,
trust the relationship.
mm,
And then yeah, again, there's that misbehavior and that
mhm,
misalignment. So
mm,
that's
mm,
really strong. And they will
mm.
naturally just express that. So we just need to
Okay,
be
so
aware of
if
it.
you've got a generator, then just being aware that they will follow through the thread of whatever they're learning with great sort of gusto and commitment and passion.
Mm,
So
mm.
if you're needing to, I guess, pull them out of something because you have a commitment or you have something else on,
Yeah,
maybe like forewarning and good communications
correct.
around that. So the expectations are really supportive and you're
Yeah.
not just suddenly going, oh, it's time to go, we're
Yeah,
late, all those kind of adrenal responses that end up happening.
that's right. And it could be just that you ask them to say, we're going out now, but when we get back, the first thing you can do is just go straight back into it. So
Mm,
there's that element, oh, okay, I can get back to it
mm,
when the time is right.
mm.
Mm,
I love this other comment that's in here that your generator can appear disruptive if they're not
yeah,
interested. That is
exactly.
incredibly
Yes.
insightful.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think as a parent, it's really helpful to identify that because what might
Mm,
be actually happening is that the child is not engaged, which is often the case. And we as adults just apply it as, it is disruptive or they're not
yeah.
willing to learn,
Yeah.
but it's just a no for
Yeah,
them,
that's right.
isn't it? In that
Absolutely.
moment, it's a
Yep.
no.
Yeah, it's a
Mm.
definite no. The other one that is really important with a man gen is man gens are multi-passionate, like they're doers. They
Mm,
just like
mm,
and they go from one thing to the next to the
mm-hmm,
next. So you have some parents who kind of go, oh, my kids, they just can't stick at
mm,
anything. And it's like, actually, that's just their design. They're designees, and we need to give them permission to
mm,
actually move from one
mm,
project to the other, to be able to pivot. So they get to the end of it and they go, okay, I'm done with that.
mm,
Move on, next thing,
mm,
the nice, shiny new things.
mm.
And
I do.
that's,
It's funny you say that because obviously we're both man gens. And I
yeah.
think one thing that I observe being a man gen and being less, I guess, critical of the way I do jump around like a goldfish going for the next shiny thing is
Mm,
there's always some kind of thread of relationship with the things I jump around to.
mm,
So
mm.
if I zoom out, I can actually see how one thing relates to another.
Yeah,
And
totally.
sometimes it's about rebalancing the left and right hemisphere and maybe
Hmm.
doing something that's still and then something very active. So
Yep.
there's a balance there. And sometimes it's different activities that sort of relate to each other and
Mm,
have relevance. And so in the wider context, there is a
mm,
reason for
mm,
all the balls that are being
mm.
juggled in the air.
And they may not always know it, or we may not always know it in
Mm,
that moment. But in reflection and looking back, you can definitely say, oh, well, actually, that's really helped me get to that point. And now
mm-hmm,
I put those two things together, and
mm-hmm.
now it makes more sense.
Yeah.
So it is about really just allowing for them to move from one thing to the
Mm,
other
mm,
without having to really justify it.
mm.
Yeah, I think
And
it's
I
important.
mean, when they're out of flow, how is a man gen showing up?
A man gen when they're out of flow is very frustrated.
Right. That
Yeah,
doesn't
so
sound
they
like
get
me
really
at all.
frustrated and they get really angry and agitated
Right.
very quickly.
Mm,
So that's the other thing that's really good to know, and
mm,
that's another part of
mm,
human design.
mm,
We're not covering it here. We can
mm,
definitely go into it, and it's really helpful when you know when they're
mm.
not out of alignment. What does it look like? Because
Yeah.
it's very normal, very natural for them to just go frustration,
Yeah.
anger,
Yeah.
act out, throw that toy, hit that brother, whatever it might be.
That is so true because I'm a man gen and two of my boys are man gen
Yeah,
and
right.
they fire up quickly.
Yeah, when they're out of
Hmm.
alignment.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
thank you for that. That's a nice little
Mm-hmm.
penny drop moment.
Yeah, there you go.
I've got a nice little reflection here that we've got my projector seems to really need a calm space to
Yeah.
make decisions.
Yes. Yeah.
Otherwise, she comes across as disinterested or non-committal. That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really great awareness into that sort of stuff, how it can
Totally.
actually it really softens how we can parent as we sort of bring this in.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
very much am not into labels, but I think there is a benefit for contextual understanding, and it
Totally.
does sort
Yeah.
of round out a little bit more of that stuff.
And I think what might happen with that particular child is that their authority might be quite emotional as well, so that they might just kind of like not want to engage or they might disengage and appear maybe a little bit disrespectful.
Mm,
But they do need those calm environments. Certain kids, and it's really important to understand
mm,
what environment they're best in, and a
mm,
calm environment for some is essential.
mm,
The other thing for a projector is that they need a lot of rest.
mm,
So they have, that they can go, 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 but it's really important to allow them time to rest. And I've got a projector, and I must say, once I understood that, I
mm.
no longer kept sort of saying they're lazy.
Oh, yes.
Oh, they're so lazy.
Such a charged statement, isn't
Oh,
it?
isn't it? And I knew that it was not necessarily a positive way of looking at it.
Mm,
But again, we put our own programming on that, our
mm-hmm,
own, adult sort of eyes.
mm,
And once I realized how important it is for a projector to take time out
mm.
and to recharge, gee, it was a life, it was changing. It changed
Can
everything for
imagine.
us. Yeah, as parents, made it so much easier.
And also, there's a story in there that somehow their laziness reflects on our parenting as well. So we won't go
Absolutely.
into that though. That's a whole other
Yep,
conversation.
yep,
Okay, well,
totally.
let's round out our human design. So we
Mm,
still need to talk
mm.
about manifestors.
Oh, the
What's the story for
manifestors. Yeah,
manifestors
well,
and supporting them from a homeschool perspective?
yeah, manifestors. There's not as many manifestors as
Mm,
there are generators and mangens. Manifestors tend to be very independent thinkers.
mm,
They like to be able to do things their way. They
mm,
tend to be great self-starters.
mm,
And so once you know again that they are a manifestor, it's about giving them that leeway just to discover in their own time and to really decide on how they want to do it themselves they don't need a lot of guidance.
mm.
Um,
They
so
sound like wonderful homeschool candidates because they're the sort that parents definitely wouldn't be here taking the leap and getting some deschooling
yeah,
advice.
yeah,
Those parents would be out there on the forums going, I don't know what the issue is. My
yeah,
child starts all the projects themselves and doesn't
yeah.
need any help. I mean, I think I would like to order a couple of those children as a
Absolutely.
homeschool child.
They are a great homeschooling child because and what's really important is that we give them the opportunity to do things without asking for our
Mm-hmm.
permission.
Mm,
Like if they have to come and say, "Can I please do this and can I have that?"
mm.
It's basically about just leaving the resources out for them and just
Um,
supporting them. They shouldn't need to ask for permission. You just need to
mm,
give them the opportunities to just
mm.
explore.
Okay, so the way we can support manifestors then is to almost have stations of curiosity or,
Totally.
areas of inquiry that they
Yes.
can move into. All
Yep.
right, that's
Yep.
really helpful. All
Yep.
right.
Yep.
So we've got our final one, which is reflectors, which you said were
Yeah.
very rare.
They're very, very rare. There's
Mm,
1% of the population.
right.
So if you think about the number of kids the reflectors are really sensitive
Mm,
young souls. Like
mm,
they feel the collective energy of everybody and everything around them.
mm-hmm.
So I know that there was a comment before about the projector needing a calm space, but the reflectors even more so.
Right.
They need a lot of calm and a lot of time to reflect on things that are happening. When it comes to making decisions, they can't make them quickly.
Mm,
They will change their mind multiple times over
mm,
weeks.
right.
So if you have they're really beautiful souls. They could be very frustrating if that's not your natural style as a parent. If you're a real doer, like imagine if you're a man, Jen, who just likes to go from here to here to here to there,
Yeah.
you wouldn't necessarily understand how to support a reflector naturally. So to actually sort of understand that if you do have a child who's a reflector, you do need to give them lots of space, lots of time, lots of calm environments, and just know that they are going to take in all the energy of everybody else around them.
I'm thinking like a jellyfish in the ocean. You
Ah.
know, just how they move really beautifully and they look like they're just going with the flow and they're not in a hurry to go
Mhm,
anywhere or get
mhm.
their meal or go visit their jellyfish friends. They just
Yes,
they're just in
yes.
the soup of
Yeah,
life. It's
they
just
really are.
yeah,
They're in their
it's
own little world. And, when we think about our kids, there are those kids who don't need a lot of social contact. In
mm,
fact, it can be very overwhelming for them.
yes.
So if you're fortunate enough to have a reflector, because they
Mm,
are beautiful, beautiful souls,
mm,
you do really need to protect their
mm,
safe space.
mm.
You need to allow for them to have that time on their own
Yes.
without feeling like they have to go to everything and they have to have lots of friends and they have to be, involved in lots of different activities. It would do them a disservice.
Yeah, so it's too much energy
Too
exposure. So when we talk about supporting our reflectors in a homeschooling environment, perhaps the
Mm,
long view, and so this is where it's a bit like your business planning, and you look at quarterly projections and
yeah,
annual plans and those sort of things, rather than even a daily or a weekly plan.
yeah,
Because what you're sort of saying is they take a while to reach a decision, and so that might be an avenue of inquiry that takes a while for them to
absolutely.
reach that.
And
So.
allow them to change their mind
Mm.
multiple times.
Mm,
So at one stage they might be really excited by something, and
mm,
then suddenly they go, "Oh, hang on, no, no, I can't do that." And there might be
mm,
moments of absolute panic, fear, worry, anxiousness, and then they'll go, "Oh, actually, maybe I can do it if it looks more like this." So then it's
mm,
about supporting them and sort of looking at how they could do it, and
mm,
they before they actually find the clarity to go, "Okay, I'm ready."
Fabulous. Okay, that's
Yep.
great.
Yep.
So we've got some ideas around how we can support our kids based
Yes.
on their human design. And I
Yep.
think, again, because this course is primarily concerned with how we as parents can deschool ourselves and
Mm,
deprogram
mm,
ourselves in a very helpful way that, makes us more unlimited.
yep.
Or limitless, shall we say,
Yeah.
then there's a real opportunity to even look at your human design and just appreciate perhaps where you're coming from and where your child's
Mm,
coming from, and where that convergence can happen in a real
mm,
sort of flow space, and you can
yes.
support each other.
Yeah.
And definitely pulling back from the need to tick stuff off every single day
Yep.
and do that, so that you actually just reduce pressure on all of you as you find your new rhythm,
Mm,
particularly if you're new to the homeschooling space or you're
mm,
just, trying this for a while,
yep.
because, who knows how long these arrangements last for.
Yep.
Changes depend on the family.
Yep.
So lots of really lovely information to get started with and food for thought. But look, if you're interested in diving further into this, Kerry is absolutely able to take you through this stuff and
Mm,
work through how you and your child can work into more of a flow state and really support
totally.
them in
Yep.
that homeschool experience,
Yep.
and be really informed about, I guess, more of the details and the nuances to do with
Mm,
both of your human
mm.
designs. Again, it's not prescriptive, but it is really informative.
Yeah. And what I find also is that some people go, "Oh, that doesn't really make sense. I never saw myself that way. Or
Mm,
I never looked at my child that way." But
mm,
once you find out what their design is and you kind of go, "Oh, okay," and you start to observe them more, you actually go, "I'm going to try that. I'm going to do it
mm,
differently," because obviously we have our own programs. So
mm.
it's really nice to just be able to try some things and just really help these kids reach their full potential, and obviously, develop some really positive, lifelong relationships with our children.
Well, that's essentially the aim of the game, and that's what we
Totally.
want for all of you, and it's
Yep.
what our experience has been.
Mm,
As we keep deprogramming ourselves, our relationship with our children just deepens and becomes so much more potent. And I
mm,
think that that's the gift that we want to keep giving forward for
yep.
all parents, because it
Right.
just is a game changer.
Yeah.
It's just a beautiful thing when you just love hanging out with your kids
Mm,
and recognizing their own individual genius
yeah.
within them and however that expresses itself.
We get to see it every day.
Yeah, it's
Mm,
beautiful.
mm,
Thank you
mm.
so much. Thank you so much for doing your homework.
Yes.
And if you're following along at home, do take a moment just to check in with those human design elements because they really do help inform you moving forward. It leads beautifully into, looking at, I guess, our role as a teacher versus a facilitator within that space, and so how you can use this information moving forward.
Yep.
So talk us through the difference essentially between teaching and facilitating.
Yeah, well, teaching is really more about I'm the expert. You sit there. This is how I see it. You
Yes.
sit there. I'll pass you over all the information, and then I want to make sure that you learn in accordance with a particular outline or a skill set. So it's not very engaging for many, I would say. Quite the old school, so to speak, way of being. So, but do you want me to go on and talk about what I think?
No, I can, in the most loving way, I can hear my mother, do as I say, not as I do.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think it's an outdated mode of learning. And particularly now that we're in this space where, I call it YouTube University, but you can literally go onto online platforms and there is just an absolute just plethora of ways to learn stuff and unique viewpoints and unique ideas, as well as I think what's considered the consensus about any particular thing. But the way that people are now sharing ideas, the opportunity to learn stuff, but have more of a critical thinking element to it, so that when you hear stuff, you get to check in on, does that sound right? Do I want to know more about that? Am I happy to just take that information and, move forward? But not this thing of just accepting verbatim what you're told because someone is standing up the front and handing it down like an edict. And I think often with teachers, particularly who perhaps are probably due some long service leave, there's an element where they might not even be believing what they're saying.
Yeah, they're just following a curriculum, aren't
Yes.
they? And they're just covering it off. And often they're quite time poor as well. And they're having to, tick all the boxes. So, they may not feel passionate in that, but they just have to, carry it through. So, it is very much about the teachers up the front of the classrooms, almost that standing there, lecturing,
Yes.
giving over the information.
Yes.
Not always engaging, asking questions, but just passing over that information.
Yeah.
So
I think when, one of the greatest gifts I say was that when we had the Rona lockdowns, my children were at school before that. And so when children came home to learn, and, we were in Victoria, so, one of the most locked down states around. So we all got very familiar with each other and our homes. Because I had to support the kids doing school at home, and I went, oh, this sucks. Like, I definitely don't want to be a teacher. I'm really clear on that. And I could see how that was impacting my relationship with the kids as well. I got very clear that I actually didn't want to be a teacher.
Yes.
But what I did want to do was to be a facilitator, which is obviously what we want to pick up on here.
Totally.
So a facilitator is about creating opportunities for learning, and particularly through, I think the richness is when kids can do that self-directed learning as well.
Yes.
Because so many kids are kinesthetic in the way they learn. They want to be hands-on and experience stuff. They want to get their hands dirty, and it's a very natural thing within children, isn't it? That curiosity to be hands-on. And so what I saw was that very much my role, often as a facilitator, would be to stand back and shut up.
Yes.
And just observe.
And maybe just ask a couple of questions like, what are you doing? What does it look like? What do you think is going to happen next? So it is really just opening it up for a more collaborative way of learning and growing. There was something else. Sorry, I was going to say.
It's going to come back. That's the great thing about Kez. She comes full circle. So I'm curious in terms of what's your thoughts then if we're talking about being a facilitator, but we're using, say, one of these online programs that, provide essentially more of that constructive learning, and I think it's very similar to the classroom learning anyway. How do we show up as a facilitator in those spaces?
Yeah, well, I mean, you mean the different types of programs that people can follow?
Well, as in how as the parent, because I think ultimately we're still the facilitator of our
Mm,
children's home education. We're certainly, I think, the operations manager is
yeah.
how I'd call it.
Yep. Yep.
You know, you do need to make sure that your kid sits down in front of the computer or picks up
Mm,
their book
mm,
and does their work. But that kind of oversight and facilitation there. One of the things I've noticed with my kids
yep.
is that if I just sit down with them whilst they're doing their online learning, like one of the things they use is an online math
Yep.
platform,
Yep.
and I sit down with them, it totally changes their experience.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they really appreciate my
Mm,
presence,
mm.
even if I'm not doing anything and the learning is coming through the computer screen.
Yes.
But just me sitting there, I think, just changes the charge of it having to be like this thing they have to do where they
Yeah.
want to push back and they
Mm,
will openly just sit there and get it done because they're just so grateful to have my
yes.
presence.
Yes. Yeah. And I think just having that little bit more one-on-one, or even
Yeah.
if you do have two or three kids at home, I really do believe you're getting a lot more attention than
Hmm.
what you are
Hmm.
with one teacher to 24 or whatever the
Hmm.
class size is now.
Mm.
Um, I think they feel supported, they feel held, they know they can sit there and ask questions. But the other benefit is that the timing, they can take as much time as they like. Like
Mm.
there's no pressure around you've got a 30-minute class
Mm.
and they have to get it done in that time.
Hmm.
So, I think what's really special about being in charge of their learning is being in charge of the time it takes
Yes.
and that pressure, because I know that that's a big part of where a lot of anxiousness is coming in for kids these days,
Yes.
is around this time pressure.
Yes.
Whether it be putting the work in at the end of a class or whether it be
Mm.
homework or
Mm.
whatever, that whole time pressure just, I feel, destroys their love of
Mm.
learning. It certainly did in my daughter's case. It
Mm.
just like the pressure that she has to perform by a certain time in a certain way.
Mm.
Whereas, yeah, being in charge of their learning, we can decide that. There are
Yeah.
no rules around it.
That is absolutely the power and the potency
Mm,
of, facilitating your child's
yes.
education, and chucking the clock out the
Window.
window is great, or at
Absolutely.
least covering it up with a very dark sheet.
Yes.
So if we
Mm,
then turn our attention to the workbook,
yep.
we can have a quick look at, what that means for us in terms of the facilitator versus the teacher. And just, I think if you want to take a moment now and you can just pause the video, you can take some time at home and just to note down the differences of how you regard the difference of teaching
Mm,
and facilitation. And
mm,
that might be informed by perhaps, what you've done in your work life, how you've learnt in the past,
mm.
but just starting to gain some insights around that. Quite often, what happens when we sort of identify the teacher versus a facilitator is we find that there is, I think, a more inclusive softness to the
Yeah,
facilitator. It's a more
definitely.
collaborative role.
Yes.
It very
Yes.
much feels like you want to walk beside
Mm,
your student within their learning,
mm.
and that changes the investment transaction that happens within that learning space as well. So, yeah, just take some time around that.
So if I could just put one more point in there though before you start, is that I really feel when it comes to this, a lot of parents are worried about homeschooling their kids or changing what their schooling looks like because they feel like they have to do the teacher role.
Yes. That
I,
would have put me off completely.
absolutely. But
Mm.
I think once we start to understand, the role of a facilitator, I just think it can change and take the pressure off.
Mm.
But,
Mm.
I might have just preempted something that they might have picked up themselves by doing this
Not
little moment of reflection.
Not in the least. It's a beautiful thing. All right, so take a moment for those
Mm,
two things, and then we'll jump to the next activity that's in your workbook as well. So you can actually just carry on and do that too. And so that next activity is just thinking about a time when your child learnt something naturally, and
yeah.
how did that happen, and what was your role? So just finding, I guess, an opportunity just to go back into the memory banks and thinking about how your child learnt something. I know that if you are sort of struggling to find a recent example, it can be really helpful to go back to when they were a toddler and just
Mm,
reflect on how
mm,
they learnt to walk, how they learnt that something was hot, how they
yeah.
learnt that you could come downstairs the fast way or the slow way, whatever it might be. But just encourage you, just have a quick reflection on those two activities, get some ideas for yourself around facilitation and teaching, and then also just reflecting on when you saw your child learn something naturally. So it wasn't sort of manhandled in a way that it was forced upon them, but
Mm.
they discovered it for themselves. And just thinking about, how did it happen? What was your role? And just noticing what that experience was from observing that child. All right. Well done. Okay, so um, you may have noticed if you're following along in the book that we're jumping around, and it is a little bit like that, isn't it? We're facilitating our own adventure.
With yeah, the natural flow. Mm.
So let's go back to the future. Go back to 2.1. And just pick up the deschooling conversation. I think this picks up a bit on what we were talking about last session. But the deschooling thing, I think, is something that it's a term that gets thrown around, and people are always sort of a little bit confused about what that
Yeah,
means. But
yeah.
essentially, think of deschooling as deprogramming, as
Mm,
essentially cleaning up your hard
mm,
drive
mm,
to just weed out the old files that you probably don't need. Probably the
mm.
1,500 photos that your child took of their toe on your iPhone or whatever it might be. It's basically just cleaning up the hard drive
Yeah,
of stuff that's not serving.
yeah.
And so when we talk about deschooling, we're essentially cleaning up the hard drive on a lot of those
Mm,
programs and beliefs and shoulds that we
mm,
have around how
mm,
we learn or how we
mm.
should learn,
Correct.
that we should go to school and we
Mm,
should sit there and
mm,
shut up and ask to go to the
mm,
toilet and
mm.
wait to eat food, not when you're hungry, but
Yeah,
when you're told. And
yeah.
all of those things that very much are about homogenizing our society into following rules and probably not being critical thinkers that we need them to be.
Totally.
So there's a few
Mm,
things to do with deschooling that we think we want to
mm,
sort of just tease apart a little bit. And so one of the things that really we would love to just riff on a little bit is what is actually learning. And I think that
mm,
you might not even have a spot in there for this question, but having some reflection on that now, like what does learning actually mean to you? And
mm,
can you
mm,
broaden that beyond going to school? Like, is there an opportunity to think about learning? Um, One of the comments here that I really love that I think really fits beautifully with
mm.
this is that found that learning in your professional life, there's often people who are not experts, but
Yep.
they teach us more by asking us the questions and challenging us to
Yeah.
think.
Yep. Yep.
That
Yep.
is absolutely bang
Mm.
on, isn't it? It really is about that.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely about just what we understand about it rather than and having the opportunity to talk about it
Mm,
openly
mm, mm.
rather than just being told everything, but it's actually having that open conversation and exploration of ideas and as you said, critical thinking,
Mm.
and not feeling like we have to be an expert or that we are all an expert
Yeah.
in a particular topic because I remember someone said to me when before I had the kids, oh, the kids will teach you so much. And I'm thinking,
Mm,
they won't. I'm
mm,
the parent.
mm.
I know everything. But actually,
You got that lesson?
I got that lesson
I got that
strong. And
lesson.
I'm very grateful for
Mm,
it because
mm,
that's the richness in
mm.
in learning. It's that just, day-to-day life experience.
Yes.
What is it? The University of
The
Life.
university life. Well, I love this comment
Mm.
as well. Learning is a lifelong process.
Yeah,
And I
definitely.
think that's why, when we have these conversations about
Yeah.
take the leap, we want
Mm,
to excite in
mm,
people
mm.
the objective of creating lifelong lovers of learning
Oh, absolutely. And
or
that's
lovers of
yes.
lifelong learning. I'm not
Yep.
quite sure about that tongue twister, but it
Mm,
is one of those two. But it
mm,
essentially is about fostering humans that are excited
mm.
to grow because,
Yes.
that is actually the purpose of life. And so within this
Mm,
deschooling, we need to look
mm,
at the effect of anxiety and ease, so
Yes.
difficulty with
Mm,
ease,
mm,
and how that affects our ability to learn. Because one thing we
mm,
do know is that when we are stressed and we're in the,
mm.
adrenally charged fight, flight, fright mode,
Yeah.
we are not learning. The learning
Mm,
centers in
mm.
the neocortex get completely turned off
Yeah.
because we go into survival mode. And so if you have a child that you're finding is often stressed,
Mm,
and they're often stressed when they're in an environment where they're meant to be absorbing information and
mm.
somehow being able to contextualize it and then
Yeah.
regurgitate it, how much of it is landing
Mm,
for them?
mm.
And
I think there's a real fear in a lot of
mm,
people's relationship when it comes to learning,
mm,
that fear of failing, that fear of not understanding, that
hmm
fear of being seen to be dumb. I know that you
hmm
found that with one of your kids.
yes,
It's kind of like that whole environment when they've got that fear around, will I be good enough and can I understand it? And,
mm,
if the style of teaching or facilitating teaching is not great for that particular learner,
mm,
there's that, and that stays with people for
yes,
forever.
yes,
So, yeah, when we're thinking about moving them out of a particular environment into a new one, it's
hmm
about what sort of environment can we create for them where they just enjoy learning regardless of the outcome,
yes.
regardless of the results.
Absolutely. I think that's
Mm,
a big part of it. So,
mm,
if you do have a child that right now is
mm,
showing up more stressed than not,
mm-hmm.
the the mm, the course of action that must take place is one of de-escalation,
Totally.
because that child can't get into a learning space until they have that anxiety dialed down. And
Yep.
sometimes with that, we actually need to create an environment where children can learn how to manage that anxiety.
Yes.
It can be in a situation where they become so conditioned to that
Mm,
anxiety, they
mm,
actually have like a chronic anxiety.
yeah.
And so their body has just been accustomed to having those stress centers fired
Mm,
up. And so you might find that that child takes some time to
mm,
try and work out how to find that calmer place, because it's not a
mm,
place of familiarity and it's not a place that they have
mm,
trust in.
mm,
So then it leads neatly
mm,
into, with the
mm,
deschooling process, how do we establish trust for our children? And
mm.
one of the things that I remember getting handed as a piece of parenting advice that I didn't want, of course, because I wasn't doing it, but it was about this calm, clear, consistent communication with my
Mm,
children. And I know that one thing that you've talked about before is also about holding the end of the rope, no
yeah,
matter what's happening. So when the
yeah.
child is really
Mm,
thrashing the rope
mm,
or trying to run away with their end of the rope or
mm,
whatever they're doing to basically
mm,
push back, it's about that grounded stillness as a parent of
mm,
holding the end of the rope so
mm,
that you can establish trust for your child that
mm,
you will be there no matter
mm.
what.
Yeah.
And that can take a period of time.
Yeah, and that is the deschooling process because there's a lot of things where kids are developing certain behavioral responses
hmm
to situations,
hmm
and taking that time both as the child and the parent to
Mm.
just release all of that expectation.
Yes.
Just release it, take all the pressure off. One of the most valuable things you can do, especially for those anxious
Mm.
kids, is just to take all the pressure off them so
Yes.
that they just learn how to enjoy being and
Yes.
doing
Yes.
and reading and just
Whatever it
being
is.
involved in
Yep.
something
Yep.
because otherwise that's the deschooling process.
Yeah, I think it's about removing that expectation of assessment.
Mm,
So you
totally.
remove the time and you get rid of the clocks, and
Yep.
you also remove the expectation of achieving or assessment or anything like that. Any kind of,
Outcome, something that
yeah,
looks like an
outcome. That's
outcome,
right.
a finished product. Yeah.
It just means that they get to experience for the sake of experiencing. And within that space, kids need to feel that and
Mm,
feel the discomfort before they can find that trust. And so,
mm,
one thing that I really am a big advocate for is a circuit breaker. If you're
yeah.
bringing your children out of school, then they will need some time to recalibrate and work out
Mm,
what it's like in their new environment,
yeah.
which is clearly not one where they're told where to go at what
Mm,
time
mm,
and who to
mm,
sit with and what to do. So it's very much, it feels like free fall, I imagine,
Yeah.
for kids.
Yeah.
But they need that time because they need to bring their adrenals back down. They need to find trust in their new environment. And, this question, thank you so much for that question there about, the rule of thumb of how long do you need to deschool or, as I would
Yeah.
say, a circuit breaker.
Yeah.
Look, the rough rule of thumb is 1 month for every single
Year
year.
of schooling. Yeah.
That's going to change. If you have a highly anxious child, there are layers of stress that have been built upon what has already been, substantial programming for how we learn. So some kids will acclimatize very quickly and
Yep.
some kids will take longer. And so what I found is when I was looking for opportunities to move out of that circuit breaker and engage in some kind of child-led learning, unschooling is another word for it. When we were engaging with that, it was by invitation. Hey, do you
Yeah.
want to do this today?
Yeah.
And I'm still asking our youngest, do you want to learn to read? I would really like you to learn to read. The kid is switched on.
Yeah.
He is so switched on, but he has been absolute staunch.
Yes. Yeah. Determination.
Absolute determination. Talk about a generator gone wild.
Yes.
So, and I said to him, I think that the world will open up for you when you read. That's my assessment. But it's got to happen with his consent. And so
Yes.
that can feel deeply uncomfortable as a parent. There's a lot of trust and surrender that has to show up in that space.
Yeah, there really is. And I think it is about deschooling us as parents as much as
Yes.
the kids as well, because we have our own programs from school. We have our own expectations, our own, desires for where our kids are going to end up and what they're going to do.
Yes.
So I remember when, we did the deschooling process, especially with our son, was that there was a lot of discomfort for me as the
Yeah.
parent as well as the child.
Yes.
It's like, well, what are you doing today? And do I need to sort of set up a structure for him? But he ended up finding things that and activities and interests that I would never have expected him to have. And that was the goal because
Yeah.
it was student led.
Yes.
And then he just ran with it. It was like,
That's right.
wow, okay, well, once he's got an interest, it's like, okay, well, how do I use that for the learning? And then you just pick out all the different bits and pieces. And, it really is literally just 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, a short conversation, just that facilitator role where they then just, you're just sort of ushering them into whatever path they want to take.
Yes.
And it really does make our role as parents so much more enjoyable.
It really does. And so, look, you'll find us talking from that unschooling or child-led learning perspective. Now, if you want to go down the pathway of still deschooling yourself or deprogramming yourself, but having your child enrolled in a more structured program, like some of the outfits that are out there, then by all means do that. But what I encourage you to do is to call it what it is, which is unless your child has expressly said, I want to do an online learning package
Yes.
that meets the Australian curriculum and I want to do it every single day.
Yes.
Unless your child has entered that by agreement and is, and there are some kids out there that say, I
ask
love
that.
it.
Yeah.
I want that. I want that structure. I want to
Yes.
show up with this. But if your child's not, then it is inherent on us as parents to recognize what program is actually playing out in that decision making. Because if it's not a child-led strategy and it's an edict that we're handing down, it might be the right thing for them, but without the alignment, without the yes from the child, without the consent from the child, are they going to be maximizing their learning? I just want to leave you with that question. It's not one of judgment. It's one of, I guess, introspection and curiosity. Because again, we're paying for these programs and I want you to get the most out of them. So is your child willingly engaged in that? And we often find that when people decide to start homeschooling, they go straight to the solution, the package, right?
Yes.
And they sign their children up for these comprehensive packages and then wonder why the child doesn't seem like they're thriving.
Yeah, they're resisting. There's a lot of resistance and it gets really heavy and really hard. I kind of want liken it to, many families love to take those road trips. They like to take, maybe the partner or, the parents take a sabbatical from work, or they
Yeah.
just take extended long service leave or whatever it might be, and they go off on a holiday, and they kind of give themselves permission in those, or some love the structure and still do a little bit of reading or whatever else along the way. But, there's real magic in not having any structure
Yes.
and then just learning as you go and discovering as you go. So I think, if we can give ourselves that opportunity to really step back and just completely change it and then re-engage with their consent, I think that that's where you'll find as the relationship between, child and parent, there's not as much resistance, and there's
Yes.
much more trust, as you spoke about before, and I feel like that's why the deschooling process is so important.
Yeah.
And I really do love what we have in the booklet, where we have a reflection piece about, what are the beliefs that are ingrained in you from your educational, journey.
Yeah. So if you're following along,
Yeah, I feel like, yeah,
2.2 in the workbook,
yeah.
and just looking at that. So you're welcome to take a moment now if you'd like to just pause where you're at and just look at the beliefs that you have around education that you're noticing that you've inherited, that you've been gifted, that you have absorbed around school, and maybe inviting in which of those you're ready to let go of or move on because they're no longer serving you.
Yeah.
Keeping in mind that as parents, as we know better, we do better. And that's
Mm.
why we're here, right? We're all here to level up our parenting so that we can create an opportunity for our kids to be the best version of themselves on their terms. And we want to facilitate that. So again, it always comes back to what's happening for us and what are we ready to move on. So just take a moment to, consider those beliefs that around what you have to do with education and perhaps what you're gifting to your children, which may or may be serving them. And then moving on from that, how do you feel about letting go of structured learning? Like, what does that look like for you? Are you nervous? Are you excited? I mean, quite frankly, I would admit to being terrified at the prospect of that. So, now that we're sort of 4 years in, 5 years in, I couldn't imagine anything different. I'm
No,
so
no.
grateful. But
When it's new, it
it's
can be
new.
overwhelming.
Absolutely. So just take a moment now just to make some notes for yourself around what that feels like. And obviously, if there's anything in the chat, you're welcome to
Yeah,
share
please
that as
do.
well.
Yep. I'm riffing.
She's reading.
Okay.
What are we reading? We're seeing.
Well,
Oh,
I'm
there's some
looking at
good
some of the
comments in
comments
here.
here. Yeah, sorry. I
Yeah,
was
so
a bit
that's right. We were
distracted.
we were still in there. That belief around that you can only do something that you're taught, and it's so not true. Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that comment. Absolutely. So, you do so many things and you learn from doing. So yeah, that beautiful kinesthetic learning that we particularly do as adults when we have a need for a new skill.
Yeah.
So that
And
brings into it.
there's real purpose behind it too, isn't there? Like there's a
Absolutely.
real daily purpose which feels really meaningful.
Well, the uptake on the learning and the integration is so much faster when it's applicable.
Yeah. Yeah, relatable. Yep.
And peer comparison, that at school, the kids are
Yeah.
compared and not able to be an individual. That is absolutely
Oh,
true too.
absolutely. Yeah, that's a great comment. And I remember, at school, one of the things I was really stuck on was being the good girl and just doing what others wanted of me, which I think reflects that individuality.
Yes.
So I wasn't actually being me. I was doing what I thought was expected of me. And, part of that was, getting good grades, because then I could go home and sort of say to my parents, hey, I got good grades today, and I knew that they'd be proud. So I was always externalizing, why I was, the outcome of that learning. It wasn't just doing it for me, it was doing it for others, to please others, to, make them proud, or because I thought that was what it was expected. And, that was something that, I know I passed on to my daughter, definitely, or maybe it was part of her, but and I think releasing that has been really liberating.
So when you reflect on that good girl sort of ingrained belief system,
Yep.
Do you think you learnt the stuff that you were learning in order to
No.
be a good, so you don't recall that?
Well, I don't remember the content of some of it. It
Yeah.
was just rote learning.
Well, that's
Is
what
that
I'm
what you mean?
that's what I'm talking about. And
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
that's the point I want to
yeah.
make is that when we observed that we were learning
Mm,
based on a program we had observed, in this case, the good girl,
yep.
people pleasing
Mm,
program that we have, we need to think about, okay, well, did that program serve me? Now, in fact, if
mm,
you can't remember the stuff that you were taught whilst you were running that program,
yeah,
then
that's right.
really it's not fit for purpose. And
Mm,
so, if the whole idea is we're investing all these resources for our children to learn stuff, and
mm,
we reflect on our own experience, and the light bulb goes off, and we realize, oh, in fact, I don't remember anything
no.
because there was already something playing out, and I wasn't
Mm,
actually being honest
mm,
about what
mm,
was going on for me. And
yep.
could I have learnt differently?
Yeah, I didn't learn to be who I wanted to
Mm.
be. I was purely just fitting in,
Mm.
doing what I was told. And it was really interesting because even though there were certain subjects that I loved, because I was under so much pressure to do well,
Mm.
I couldn't remember any of it.
Mm.
So that, even though like geography, I love geography,
Mm.
but I actually really did poorly at it because I was just so worried about doing it well that I
Mm.
wasn't actually enjoying it.
Yes.
I just wasn't loving it. Wasn't loving the learning
Mm.
process. Mind you, I think teachers at that stage were very much teacher, not facilitator.
Yes. And I'm sure that teaching
Mm,
has come along, but so too have kids' anxiety. And this is obviously why
totally.
we're here, because
Mm,
there are so many kids and
mm,
parents that
mm,
are quietly suffering in their homes, essentially isolated and really not knowing how to take effective
mm.
action. The honest truth of it is you must just take the pressure off in some
Oh,
fashion. You just
totally.
must.
Yes.
And so,
Yeah.
I mean, that leads us nicely into this next beautiful exercise. I love this
Mm,
exercise so much. So, this exercise, and again, there's a page in your workbook, but I just would
mm,
invite you to, you know, pause
mm,
this recording, or obviously take a moment now if you're joining us live. And I just want you to give yourself the opportunity to picture your child as a 32-year-old
mm,
sitting in front of you across the kitchen table. Maybe you're in the house you're in now. Maybe you've moved to a house where you've got an amazing view and, that's where you enjoy your morning coffee or whatever, right? But take yourself to that place, that point in the future where you've got your child, this adult now who very much looks like a beautiful, functioning human
yep.
and upstanding member of society, and just reflect on what they're saying about their learning experience when they were a
Mm,
kid.
mm,
What do you want to hear from them? What was their learning like? What were the things that stood out to them? How did they feel when they were learning? Just take some moments just to think about what it is you would want in that future experience where your child's telling you about their schooling years and
mm.
how that was for them. Awesome. Okay, so this exercise is incredibly potent in terms of how we can tap into the future version for our child and start informing
Mm,
ourselves about the decisions, even small decisions that we can take today that might just put us on that pathway for that experience in the
mm,
future. And
mm,
so I encourage you, if you've got more to write about that, then do
mm,
spend some time. If you've got multiple children that you want to go through this exercise and, think about, because they'll all have their different personalities. And I'm sure that
mm,
as you create some stillness for yourself, you'll be able to engage with that future version of that beautiful little soul that you're raising. So do create some opportunity for imagining or cultivating for
mm,
yourself that
mm.
future experience.
Yeah, it's a beautiful exercise because I think it really it helps you just get clear about what you want to provide for them
Yes.
and what you want the environment to look like
Mm.
and what really is ultimately the long-term benefit of being, really in charge of their education. It's a beautiful exercise. Okay,
What you
so
got
what we
next? Have
got
we got
next?
more
So, yeah,
exercises?
what we're really wanting to try and do is, it's an important part of this process that when we decide to change up our kids' education and, whether it be part-time schooling or homeschooling or whatever it's going to look like. But if you're going to do it differently, I think we really do need to just think about our own past experiences, and what they meant to us and just what we were like as students.
Yes.
Like, what were you like as a student, Jodes? Were you,
Oh, I was definitely a model student.
were you?
Not with grades, but
No.
you know what? It's actually, I've never thought about this. I was an absolute man gen student.
Yeah, there you
I
go.
was on
Yeah.
council and I was
Yes.
head of the
Yes.
SRC and I
Yeah.
organised fundraising events and I worked in the canteen and I did everything else besides basically study and get A's. I
Yeah,
didn't
there
do
you
that.
go.
I was a BC
You were
student.
living by your design, you just didn't
Yeah.
know it.
I know, I didn't know that. I was the juggler at school.
And sorry, going back to that, but if you knew that back then, would you have embraced it more or it didn't make a
Oh,
difference?
I think what I would have done is embraced that absolutely, but
Yeah.
also not internalized the
Yes.
belief that I'm
Mm.
dumb because of the grades I got. I got those grades because I wasn't interested in
Yeah.
doing the study. I'm what's called a one draft wonder. I
Yeah.
figure the first draft is the best. I won't tell that to my other children. Obviously, it applies to my firstborn. But what I do think is that it doesn't engage my interest level to labour over particularly written essays. So I never would have been an academic. And I think that, yeah, that was absolutely reflected. But for a long time, I didn't think I was very smart and I couldn't learn things. But now I know I can learn all sorts of things.
And you don't need to go into great detail. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Well, you know, I love functionally fit.
Yeah, I know.
I talk
Yeah.
functionally fit all the time. And
Yeah.
I'm all about learning something to make it fit for purpose and I use it.
Yeah.
And then if I need to learn more, I go and up level again. But
Yeah.
if I don't, I leave it at
Yeah,
that.
you move on. Love it.
I love that way
Yeah,
of life. It's
and
so,
well,
it's
it
so
works for
effective.
you, doesn't
It
it? It
does.
works for you. So what we want you to just sort of think about is, and why we need to know what we're like as learning is because we do put that expectation to be that type of learner on our children. And as we know, we're all different, we're all unique, and we want to celebrate that uniqueness. So, just sort of thinking about, were you an active or were you a passive learner? Some people can just sit back, take it all in, move on. They've got it. They don't need to discuss it much. I know my husband's really quick at learning. He's a really fast learner. And then he moves on to the next thing. I'm a little bit slower. I certainly need to, take a little bit more time. I need to get involved in things. I need to have the opportunity to ask lots of questions. I know it
Yeah,
probably
it's the reason
drives
why you're called curious.
curious. Absolutely. That is definitely something I am. So I think understanding our own, I guess, memories of the way we learnt
Yes.
and how that impacted on us going into adulthood and going into, say, further education or even learning on the job. I think we just need to understand more about that so that we realize what's ours. And there's pros and cons to all of it, isn't there? And to not then project that onto our kids as something maybe I was bad at something and therefore I want to make sure my children don't have that experience. We have to let them have their own experience.
Yes.
But we need to support them in what works for them by understanding what our triggers are towards the learning process. So, that's why we have a look at us as parents because once we realize, oh gosh, that's mine, that's not theirs. I think it's an important part of the process. So
The sort of center point to this exercise particularly is one of observation.
Yes.
It's one of observing, your reflections of you as a child learner, whether that was a teenager or, during primary school years. And then applying that observation viewpoint to your children as well and thinking about how do they learn. And it's really, it becomes a place where we need to create the opportunity for ourselves to be hands off with these things. So we need to provide the opportunity to observe our child learning something
Yes.
or following a line of inquiry that they have created for themselves and seeing how that proceeds. And the reason why I say a line of inquiry that they've created for themselves is that when we've provided the opportunity, there may be all those things you were talking about around the need to, perform in a certain way, to be a good boy or girl and actually, meet those requirements. Some money has been spent, like all the loaded things that happen. But a child that's initiating their line of inquiry is wholly invested in that.
Totally.
And they've created the momentum for that. So, thinking about those things, but really noticing what sort of learner you were and noticing perhaps what kind of learner you are now. So I know that with our little worksheet, when we look at unpacking school memories and thinking about what that was like for us, there can be emotions attached to those memories.
Yeah.
And, if you were a particular type of learner and perhaps that wasn't facilitated or there wasn't spaciousness in the school that you went to, perhaps you have some feelings about that. And again, we're not looking to, stir up old hurts, and we're not looking to pull skeletons out of the cupboard or anything like that. But those, I think, unresolved feelings can dwell within us and really shape our decision making. So there's an opportunity here, I think, to just comfort the inner child that perhaps wasn't heard in that moment,
Yep.
so that we don't carry through those frustrations to our children. It really can change the relationship with the child. It's almost like you're cleaning the blackboard
Yeah.
of the
Cleaning it.
chalk.
Yep.
Yeah, before you move forward to really take responsibility for your child's education.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we do pass it on to them. And I think it's really important that we don't get in the way of them having their own experience.
Yeah. Well, I love this comment. I want them to say that they were happy and they had fun and had lots of fun experiences.
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, the positive experiences that I have was when we were having lots of fun.
Yes.
And then you look back on those moments of perhaps where I struggled to learn a new thing or engage in something is often going back to those moments where I felt a lot of pressure at school.
Yes.
Or I was worried about something. So, learning should be fun. It should
Absolutely.
be something that fills us up
Yeah.
with a sense of joy and just that own internal satisfaction.
Yes.
Rather than that external satisfaction or that
Yeah.
external, gratification.
Well, when we're in a fun mood and a fun state, we're in a yes space. And so yes is a really great fertile ground to learning. You're really open, you're really adaptable to the information, and you're integrating stuff and you're relating it to what you know to be so. And so it's a very powerful place to learn. And one thing that has become commonplace in our household is that we learn through games.
Yes.
But the beautiful thing that I love about games is not just that they're fun and we get to learn through them, but there is also this forging and fortifying of the bonds of affection within our family. So the relationships between child and parent, parent and parent, sibling and sibling, and the power within that, because I can see that that's the stuff that's actually going to carry us through into the future.
Yep.
There'll be some nice things that we learn along the way as well.
Yep.
But the fact that we have such incredible bonds and, such a powerful platform to move forward on as a family is really, that's the thing that's really affirming for me. So I'm
Totally.
a big fan of games in
Yes.
families, but particularly as a parent, if you can find time in your day to create that opportunity, and they don't take long.
No, they don't.
But the difference in the
Yes.
kids when we engage with them in a
Yep.
fun way,
Yep.
I was
Yep.
never a fun mum. And in fact, I always thought I just didn't have that gene of being the fun mum. And I was okay with that. I was like, I'll just be of service.
Yes.
I'll make sure they eat.
Yes.
I'll buy all the organic stuff. I'll drive them places. I'll provide opportunities, all that stuff. But I didn't engage with them from a fun place. And the way that I became my version of a fun mum was to have them home all the time, which I could never have
Yes, I
predicted.
know. I know, it's
There's a
interesting,
belief
isn't it?
system we need to not have our children with us so we can get the energy up so that we can actually want to hang out with them. And in fact, it's my learning has been the opposite. When I'm around them all the time, I'm more likely to engage in fun with them. And the response that I get from my kids is just like it blows my mind and kind of makes me feel a little bit bad that I haven't been more a concerted, fun mum because they just absorb it so much. They
Yeah.
absolutely love it,
Yeah.
and so that is one of the things that's actually changing our relationship the most profoundly.
Because I guess you are with them all the time, and so you find the rhythm
Yes,
of just being together. It's not like, oh, I've got to do this and I've got to make this happen. You're not forcing things.
yes,
Yeah, there's just a lot more flow, just a natural flow. And I think the other thing, and I can see there's some comments there, but I think the other thing is that, you're all equal. There's no sort of someone's there, someone's in this grade, someone's at this age. It's very much everyone is equal.
yes,
And that's something that I think, yeah, that's really powerful because when you leave school and you go into the workplace, there's lots of different ages there. I remember
yes.
working with people who were close to retirement age in my first job. And so you've got to learn to just sort of say, well, we're all here, we're all working together. So, yeah, that's,
The artifice of life is that we all hang out with people the same age, and the only place that happens is school.
yeah, that's right.
It's interesting,
That's
isn't it?
fascinating, isn't it?
Very interesting. I love this comment. Yes, I said yes recently to take my child to a hobby store. It sounds like an expensive exercise.
Yes.
To explore his interest in remote control cars, not something I had any knowledge or was able to teach him about. Yeah, so there's an opportunity then that you get to be
Yeah.
co-learners in that
Yes.
space.
Yeah. And it's fun because then you go back to
Yeah,
your own inner child
yeah, yeah.
and you get to do it together.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
that's
awesome.
right.
I
I
love
know it's
that.
definitely been the
Yeah,
space
just
for us
went with
too
it.
that we can actually be co-learners. And one thing that I have noticed is that now that our kids are around me all the time, they're observing how much I learn as well.
Yes.
So I get to be an example of that learning too, and that's really powerful. If you can show your kids you learning something, there's I think we've been told as parents we need to have all the answers, and I know that that's a concern for
Yes.
parents who are starting out. So part of taking the leap is actually letting go of that program that you need to be, a jack of all trades, because the reality is we are a master of none
Yeah.
often.
Yeah.
And so the only master we need to be is one of curiosity and commitment to learn something new and push through the discomfort of
Yep.
something new.
Yeah, I think also one thing I remember early on in our homeschool journey was we met another homeschool family who ran their own business. And they said that when they ran their business, that they took their kids with them to every single meeting.
Yes.
And they just, through osmosis, their kids were watching, learning, observing, and they probably didn't realize at the time what they were taking on, but it became a normal part of their family rhythm and structure. And I think, just looking at it from that perspective as well as, we don't have to know everything, but they can watch us learning, they can watch us trying new things, they can watch us negotiating with people, they can watch us meeting new people, forming new relationships. I mean, that's valuable,
Yes.
isn't it?
Oh, I just think it's life. And so starting to get a little bit more elastic and broad with how you think this change can happen. I know that obviously next week, or in our final session, we'll talk about, some of the, I think, more functional aspects of how to have your children home,
Yes.
the balance of technology, the
Yes.
balance of having rhythms and routine and things like that.
Yep.
But one thing that did teach us when we were speaking to that homeschool family was it was something that we had always thought was exclusive to the children. And when they sort of said that, it made perfect sense as to why they had four very entrepreneurial
Yes.
adults.
Yes.
Because these children had grown up in that space not thinking that this was secret adult business
That's
that they
right.
weren't privy to.
Yeah.
They were there, and also they weren't, I think, awarded that assumption that children will be disruptive in
Yes.
adult,
Worlds,
yeah,
universes.
yeah, yeah.
Mm,
You know, these adult
mm,
appointments that we think we need to
mm,
concentrate on, and
mm,
somehow the kids are going to need to be babysat. I think that's part of the scourge on society is we constantly
mm,
put children in front of technology thinking they
mm.
need to be digitally babysat
Yes.
whilst, the adults do some
Yeah,
adulting.
that's right.
But in fact,
Mm,
this family was a great example of the fact
mm,
that when children are just sort of organically exposed to these learning
mm,
opportunities, who knows where they will end up? And,
mm-hmm.
two of their children in their mid-20s were running a multi-million-dollar
Yes.
business.
Yeah, I know.
Like that's pretty
Extraordinary.
nuts to me. And that started just through a hobby that they had,
Yes.
and they just grew the business.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
they weren't, sharks by any
No, not
mean
at
in
all.
terms of business prowess. I mean,
No.
lovely people and
Yeah.
very successful with what they were
Yes.
doing. But
Yep.
would you have assumed that they, would have,
Mm,
brought on then sons who could have such an extraordinary
mm,
business
mm,
and build such an empire? And
mm.
these kids had done that
Yep.
just because osmotically they were picking up what needed to be done, but they were
Mm,
also not limited and consigned to being children
mm,
doing children things. And
mm,
so
mm,
when
mm,
when you give yourself the opportunity as you keep moving through the processes and the reflections and the activities within
mm,
this
mm.
program and obviously other programs around you, and you start noticing, okay, how can I do a reframe
Yeah.
with a lot of these day-to-day things? Because I think parents can often put a lot of pressure on themselves to meet, say, the curriculum, not realizing that when
Mm,
we broaden our sort of
mm,
definition of what the
mm,
Australian curriculum
mm,
is, there
mm,
are a myriad of
mm,
lessons in everyday life that can, be real teachable moments, but
mm.
more than that, they're actually life skills. And we
Yes.
often forget to teach kids the life skills thing because we're
Mm,
so
mm,
busy teaching them,
mm.
when the Ming Dynasty happened, which I
Yeah,
thought is,
that's so true.
or what the hell
Yeah.
Pythagoras's
Yeah.
theorem is.
And
And
I
I,
never used it again ever
I'm
once I
sure
finished school. Ever.
it's helpful to some
It may
people.
be.
But
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
curious about how relevant that is. And it's funny because obviously one of the recent things that I know we've spoken about before, but I think this is something that I want our beautiful community to really embrace is that my 17-year-old has just through learning opportunities keeps getting offered work.
Yeah.
Fascinating what happens for
Mm,
homeschool kids that
mm,
have spaciousness to be
yeah.
available, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we set up these opportunities for learning, and then
Mm,
what happens is he proves to be so capable that the people that are, essentially offering this work experience provide jobs.
mm,
And so what I basically said to him was, I said, out of interest, are you paying any tax? And he's like, what's that? And I went, well, let's have a look at your pay slip and
mm,
see what's happening. And sure enough, because he had two different jobs and he wasn't working many hours, but the second job had tax applied to it. So the
mm,
first job hadn't because obviously
mm.
he's a low income earner,
Yep.
but the other job had a few $100s
Mm.
just casually deducted from it. Now, firstly, he's not aware of that.
No, it doesn't know what that means. Yeah.
Secondly,
Mm,
I got issues with the ATO about the fact that you're taxing someone who, yes, has a second job, but is
mm,
earning like a few $1,000s a year,
mm,
right? Anyway, so the whole point
mm,
was that most recently we've been through the process of doing a tax return.
mm.
Now, I'm curious to know how many other 17-year-olds, how many other 16-year-olds that maybe have a couple of gigs that they're working at are doing tax returns
Mm.
because that little, Christmas saver for him is going to
Yes.
pay dividends and he's going to,
Mhm.
get a nice
Enjoy
little
that.
lump sum back.
Mm,
But this is the stuff.
mm,
So, had we not had that conversation that
mm,
had come up casually,
mm.
and then that led to that line of inquiry where he
Yes.
went and investigated that and his pay
Mm,
slip, and then he's like, what do I need to do to get that back? And I'm like,
mm,
well, in fact, it's quite easy. And so we
mm,
went through the process of filling that in.
mm,
Now, that is part of the Australian curriculum. You
mm,
are actually learning math
mm,
and,
mm,
all sorts of other things that fit into that. There's an element of business studies within that as well. And so there's some real relevance with how you can have these life skills. But more than that, I now have a 17-year-old who knows how to do a tax return,
Yeah.
is now consciously going to notice his work-related expenses. So he's committed to that as well. And so we can see how these life skills are going to be so useful for him right now. And I know that obviously for you, one of the focuses you've had for one of your kids has been budgeting. And again,
Yes,
something we do not teach our kids.
No. And I hear a lot of parents, when I talk about, budgeting just as a general conversation, people go, oh, yeah, I really wish I was taught that when I was at school. That is a really, really common subject that I know many who really wish they had that at school and yet struggle through their adult years knowing how to budget, how to save, why they don't ever feel on top of their finances, why they feel like they're constantly in debt, and so that is something, and it does take a bit of time to go through that. We do it on a regular basis, and it does bring up a lot of conversation, a lot of awareness, a lot of just rejigging things, a lot of learning, like, oh, I overspent that week and what does that mean and how do I get more money because I've got this particular thing that I have to pay for. And I mean, they are life skills, and not just that, but they're skills that a lot of adults find very stressful.
I think so too, because we
cause a lot of
obviously have,
stress.
a particularly difficult relationship with money.
Yeah.
And so, yes, so starting to broaden, I guess, our concept of where our learning opportunities are. And, we're coming obviously towards the close of this beautiful session, and there'll be many more practical elements of that. But what I want to do is empower you to start without adding anything else to your plate, because you are already doing so much being a really conscious parent. I mean, you're here, right? So even from that perspective, gold star, A plus,
Yeah, you're here.
you're getting all that. Not that we're assessing you, it's not assessable, but the point is you're already doing that, right?
Yeah.
You've shown up, with your heart and your curiosity. So to just add some awareness, where are there teachable moments in your daily life? What could you bring into your child's awareness that will fundamentally be life skills that will carry them through?
Yep. Yep.
I definitely did accounting in year 10, and the only thing I remember is spreadsheets.
Yeah, it's interesting because I did accounting and also and really struggled with it. But I can do a budget because I think that was instilled in me from my parents.
That's right, but I didn't learn budgeting at school. I definitely didn't learn taxes, and I was working a bunch of jobs at that age as well. So I'm just so curious about what other places we didn't get the education that would have been useful to us, and where we can actually stop that generational kind of mismanagement of information for our kids and bring in real purposeful learning. So what I want you to do is really just give yourself some spaciousness to think about what other opportunities there are for learning, not just things that you wish you'd been taught, but what are you already doing that you're not really thinking twice about, but could actually be, starting to teach your kids around and provide those life skills. Undoubtedly, they will fit into the curriculum. There is opportunities for learning everywhere.
Yep.
Absolutely everywhere. We love that.
Yep.
So, Kez,
Yes.
where are we at? What are we up to?
Well, I wonder whether we just start thinking about what naturally is occurring for our kids in what they're learning just on a day-to-day basis and what role we're already taking. And I think if we stop to do that, we might actually realize, as you've sort of given some great examples, where it's actually already happening.
Yes, that's right. So it's not so arduous, this
Yeah.
idea of teaching your children or
Correct.
facilitating learning.
Correct. So I feel like noticing where it's not going to be hard or where it's not going to be feeling like it's an extra task on top of our already heavy load of responsibility of parenting in today's world.
Yes.
With so many things that are going on. But, what is naturally already taking place? What are they learning And then what is your role within that?
And how can you help facilitate that? You might not be the answer to
Yep.
that learning.
Yep.
It might be that you need to recruit some help. And,
Yep.
the community is always available to you. You will know people that can support you in this.
Definitely.
So there
Definitely.
is definitely opportunities when we start thinking laterally.
Mm.
There's been another comment, and thank you, just basically confirming essentially what you said, Kez, which
Yeah.
was, learning all the budgeting and money and use and choices from your parents and family.
Yeah, and this is where we possibly are guilty of assuming that they're going to get all their lessons from school.
That is
And
a very good
we
point.
have outsourced it, haven't we? We've
Yes.
outsourced that feeling that the kids are going to get what they need by sending them to school.
Hmm.
And in fact, I think this is a really good example of where we still have a very important role, and we should take it as an honor.
I do. I mean,
Yeah.
I think, there's a lot of teachable moments within even how my four kids learn. And my youngest very much likes the idea of money, but
Yeah.
treats, 50 cents with as much reverence as $50.
Yeah.
And often we just find his money lying around the house.
Yeah.
Now, if he's left it there for a couple of days and I've asked him to put it somewhere safe and he doesn't do it, then I consider that a donation to the household. They're tough lessons,
Thanks,
but
doll.
he doesn't have a reverence
No.
for what that money is. There's no care in there. And so that then says to me, he's not ready for the budgeting stuff.
That's right.
Because he
That's
doesn't
right.
get what money can do for him yet. But the other kids, they're really understanding that. And there's a language around, what opportunities their money presents. Some have got more of a tight-fisted approach to it.
Yes.
And so then the learning around that is about helping them loosen their grip on it and perhaps not make it such a controlling element in their life. And then, there are other kids that within our household that I think have a very healthy approach to money and, spend a little bit and save a bit. And,
That's that individuality, though, isn't it? And
it
I
is.
think it is very much personality based and motivation based.
Yes.
Because I know the difference between our two kids, we have had to sit down and do a budgeting process very specifically with one. The other one has just almost done it just naturally because they're motivated by feeling like they've got money in the bank, that they've got options on what they want to spend it on. So, I think understanding the differences in the kids as well. And this is, I guess when you're at school, you learn it whether you want to or not. Whereas when you're when we're the facilitators of their learning, we can support them in either just letting them go and learning it or sitting down with them and guiding them and supporting them and, helping them understand it. So,
Right.
they're all different. They're all very different.
Well, I mean, I think that's where you can get that clarity around titrating your facilitation or your teaching. And some subjects you will spend longer with certain children. If you have a bunch of kids and they've all got their unique personalities and their human designs and all those other
Learning styles,
nuances and individualities, then you will need to be I think agile with how much time you spend on some of those things. Some will land well, some will land with, a little bit more bumpiness and need a little bit more sort of lateral thinking in terms of how we get the message across. But the need is that you can look at your day-to-day experiences and just the general, things that you need to do to run your life. And the learning will be there. You don't need resource heavy days where you outsource this information in a more impractical way. There's so much practicality, and kids that, by my observation, love the practical application. Like that is constantly the question that comes back in our household. One of them particularly loves like a gazillion different versions of one thing. Oh, but what if this? And I'm like, we could like discuss this for
All
the
day.
next, like century, I mean, there'll be a million different ways that you can change this slightly. What is the duck's guts of what you're asking? But the point is, what's of interest to him, how it applies in reality. He wants to know what that situation looks like, and does that change it? Is it a variable or does it stay consistent? And from that point of view, I really appreciate
Yes.
it. You know, he
Yep.
gets the relevance of it and he's
Yep.
trying to apply that to his
Mm,
life and
mm,
what he knows to be so.
mm. And he's got the opportunity to keep asking questions.
He doesn't have the opportunity to have them answered all the
No,
time,
that's
but
okay,
yes.
because we don't have to always have the answers, and we can sometimes say we need to
Or the
pause
wish
there.
to answer is where I'm going with
Yeah,
that
yeah,
one.
maybe.
Often
Yeah,
I have to clock off.
yeah, fair enough. Fair
I'm
enough.
sorry, you had 5 questions today and you've used all of them.
Well, we're in charge of the time. Throw it out the window or use it to our advantage, whichever way you want to go.
What are these beautiful people doing in the week coming? What have they got on? What have you got there?
What do you mean?
You've got a final exercise.
Well,
You must be almost at homework time.
well, it's not, well, it is almost homework time, but it's like one of the things that they could do, should they choose to, is just noticing where their kids are learning without any formal education, like any formal guidance.
I would love
What is
to add an
something?
exclusion to that,
Yeah.
and that is technology.
Yes, right. Okay.
So
Yeah, perfect.
in our
Mm,
technology
mm,
dependent world, where so much learning is intertwined with technology,
mm,
I would love for you to get more creative
mm.
than that.
Definitely.
Okay,
Yes.
because we actually don't know what's landing with technology
No.
and what's not. There's so much gamification of, and we'll talk more about
Yeah.
technology next
Next
week
week. Yeah.
or the next
Yeah.
next session. There's so much gamification, we actually can't
Mm,
really assess it in a true sense.
mm,
So the challenge to you is drop the tech,
yep.
find
Yep.
something else.
Yep.
So it might be
Yep.
in sport,
Yep.
it might just be in nature on
Yep.
an excursion,
Yep.
it might just be quietly around the house, it might be through a game.
Cooking's a really
Cooking.
good one. Cooking's a great one.
Mm-hmm,
Like,
mm-hmm,
that I know that for my daughter in particular,
mm-hmm,
the things she has taught herself and learned
mm-hmm,
in the kitchen
mm-hmm.
is extraordinary.
Yes.
But that's because she just
Mm.
enjoys being in there and that's the environment and the like. So, there's a lot that they can do without having any involvement from you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's
We
really interesting to see where it
we've
is.
had an extra invitation for another exclusion, which is it doesn't have a cost associated with it.
Aha,
So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Well, and there's a lot. This is another
Mm,
conversation that we
mm,
have actually on our First Steps program
mm.
is homeschooling expensive?
Yes.
And you know what? There's a lot you can do without
Well,
spending any money.
there's a lot of money you can spend too.
Well,
You can
there is, of
spend a lot.
course, but you can get really resourceful.
I agree.
Really resourceful.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the one part that I think a lot of parents just don't
Mm, mm,
realize is how
mm-hmm.
resourceful you can become. And by being resourceful, you're also teaching your kids how to be resourceful.
Yes, I love that. Well, that's where creativity lives,
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm,
So, okay, so
mm-hmm.
we've got this opportunity where children are wired to learn
Yep.
without force and coercion, which
Yeah,
is
they
just beautiful.
naturally do it. They
So,
can naturally do it.
we're looking for 3 things
Mm-hmm.
that your child has learnt recently, or you might observe them learning before we meet again,
Yep.
and just without the formal instruction. So
Yeah.
just again, putting ourselves in the observer role, it's
Yes.
an incredibly
Powerful.
powerful
Mm,
position to
mm-hmm,
place yourself
mm-hmm,
in. I
mm-hmm.
think in this world of so much activity, distraction, and doing,
Yep.
that we often skip the observer
Mm,
role. And
mm, mm.
one thing that I know to be so now, having the kids home, is that I find myself in the observer space more and more. And gosh,
It's beautiful, isn't
oh,
it?
it's the best. It's the best. It's like an
Yes.
absolute
Yeah.
drug. The more I do it, the more I
Mm.
want to do it.
The more you step out of the way
Mm.
and just watch,
Mm-hmm.
it's really powerful.
And it's brought a lot of peace to my parenting as well.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
Even when the kids are having a bit of argy-bargy, which I think
Mm.
is really important for them
Yes.
to,
Yep.
develop those life skills of how to communicate effectively.
Yeah.
As I sort of, step back out of that and just
Mm.
observe that, and they're looking for me to resolve that for them. And I'm
Mm.
like, no, you guys need to work on
Mm.
this conflict
Mm.
resolution because you got to live together.
Yep.
You're roommates after
Yep.
all.
Yep.
And just allow them to, or enable them to, work that through
Mm.
themselves. After initial sort of resistance of wanting to be saved from their situation, once I, continue to stay out of that space, they do just work it out
Mm.
themselves. I
Mm.
mean,
Mm.
sometimes, there's a few curt words in there,
Of course.
but it's all part of this learning opportunity for them. So again, there you go. There's another example of
Yep.
where, and so that's where it might be. One of the things that you might observe is your child learning conflict resolution with their
Totally.
sibling.
Totally. And I think you have that opportunity to really observe on a consistent basis with the same people
Yes.
and see it as a learning opportunity. Because I know that when we're stressed as parents and when we're overwhelmed with maybe work commitments and other things that are going on around us, that we just react to
Absolutely.
that overwhelm of fighting or, whatever carrying on in the background. But there is a lot of lessons that we can take and then watch them. And even sometimes I find having those individual conversations, like letting them just whatever they have to do, knowing it hasn't necessarily resolved, but then, having separate individual conversations and saying, so what happened there? And, did it achieve what you wanted to achieve? What have you learnt from that? They're really important. So that's that
Yep.
observation, that opportunity to observe. But when we're time poor and when everyone's tired at the end of the day, it can be exhausting trying to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. What's our home
home
pleasure?
home
Sorry, home pleasure. Thank you.
It is. We'll continue this by just saying, continue to observe your child, find out what your role is in their learning throughout the week. What are they learning without you naturally, and what are they learning where you're actually feeling the need or you are involved by facilitating, or are you actually even taking on the teacher role at times? I think we just need to stop and just go, okay, and where did that all come from? So that's definitely part of the home pleasure that we want them to do.
So if we notice a pattern within that, then there's an invitation to try doing it differently.
Yep.
If you find that you're giving a lot of instruction, give yourself an opportunity at a different occasion to just stay quiet a little bit longer, maybe just move yourself slightly backwards so you're not in the primary circle of activity.
Yep.
And just provide that opportunity to see what happens. Obviously, don't let them burn the house down.
No, of course not.
But there is a great opportunity that we find as parents, and I was an absolute classic for this, where I'd jump in.
Yes.
And I'd assert myself and I would affect the situation. And once I became a more practiced observer, I was delighted and surprised by what I noticed. And the kids, it just filled me with a knowing that the kids actually are far more capable and I think far wiser than we give them credit for. They just do. They have an incredible wisdom, but we often don't see it because they're so used to deferring to the big people.
I'm very guilty of that. My son often just gives me the look now as if to say, you don't need to tell me, Mum. Like, okay.
He's a blessing.
He's a wise one, absolutely. So yeah, it's all about observing your child. That's what we want them to start doing, and just noticing how they are learning and what your role actually is in their learning throughout the week. So I think that's probably the main thing that we really want them to focus on before we get together again. And this time it's we'll put the dates. I think it's going to be different whether you're watching from home now or on the replay. So
next session is the safe way to call it.
Yeah, next session.
Okay. So you've got some beautiful home pleasure. Please feel welcome to utilise the I Am Child mind movie if you want to bring that to your children. It can be a really beautiful thing to bookend their day. We're most suggestible and susceptible to I guess, beliefs and programming when we first wake up and when we're going to sleep at night. So that's when we tend to have, brainwave changes to bring us into that sort of susceptibility and programmability. And, in this world of digital technology where it rules the roost everywhere, why not bring in something that can really level up how we feel about ourselves? So that is there by invitation for you to introduce to your children. The rule of thumb usually with mind movies is that if you watch it each day for 3 weeks, you tend to notice that that's when those belief systems start adjusting. You'll see some change by the 21st day. And it can be a really beautiful thing to sit with your child and just watch 2 minutes, a little bit of, parent and child time, and such a nice little ritual to bring into your day.
They're valuable. They're beautiful. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Until
Lovely.
next time, thank you so much for the people present in this session. Thank you so much, for bringing those contributions. We just love hearing your insights. And again, it just reaffirms that we are all lifelong learners, all here to teach one another and facilitate these experiences. So again, just so much gratitude for showing up. And
and please also, if you've got questions that you want us to address even next week, if you've found something that has come up for you in between each session, by all means, get in contact with us, let us know, or even just next time join in the chat and just put your questions in there or share with us what you've learned. So we love hearing from you. So thank you.
All right. Until next session, people, enjoy your home pleasure always, and we will see you very soon.
Thanks for being with us. Bye.